Style is something artists talk about and agonize over all of the time, and so today I want to talk about how I'm finding mine. So I've been working at building and cultivating my art style for a little over a year now, and over that time I've developed an increasingly clear vision for where I want to take my art. That has helped me improve much faster and waste way less time. There are 4 steps to this process, 4 steps to figuring out your art style and finding the direction that you want to take your artwork in. And the first is painfully simple. It's just to identify the stuff that you like. And this is a little bit more complex, actually, I guess, now that I think about it, because really, there are 2 different kinds of art that you can like. There's art that you like, but you would never be able to work in. Like, you would never be able to emulate that kind of thing. Like, you just don't have it in you. Like, I, for example, would never be able to paint like Caravaggio because I simply don't have the patience for painting like Caravaggio. Like, that's not me. I love it. It looks gorgeous, but it's not something that I feel passionate about. I wouldn't be creatively fulfilled, per se, by that kind of art. But the kind of art that you should be paying attention to is the kind of art that fits into the second category, the kind of art that you really do love, that you are incredibly passionate about, and that you're really, really interested in recreating and kind of making your own art similar to it. The stuff that, like, you think deep down to yourself, oh my God, I would love it. Like, my life would be complete. My mission as like a human being, as an artist, like fully realized if I managed to make art like this. That is the kind of stuff that you want to collect. And while you're identifying all of this stuff that you really like, I highly recommend that you don't limit yourself to a certain period in history. The benefit to being alive right now is that you have all of human history so far to pull from as inspiration. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, all right? You can pull from as many historical periods as you choose. There is so much art to choose from Byzantine mosaics to pre-Christian art to Japanese woodblock prints, to the kind of art people are making today, to all of the tiny little art movements peppered throughout history. You have so much to choose from. Don't limit yourself. So personally, for me, there's about 150 to 200 year range of art that I'm really interested in. From now until like the mid 1800s, I'm super fascinated by the art that was made in that time period, from the Impressionists onward. So European Impressionists like Berthe Morisot, American Impressionists that happened later, like Willard Metcalf and Emile Groupie, and then we have American Tonalists that happened after those American Impressionists, like Ben Foster and Leonard Ochtman, and then finally we have the more modern contemporary landscape painters, the kind of artists that I found on Instagram, like Jess Franks, Amy Montgomery, and Richard Schmid. So all of those artists just form this big tapestry of things that I'm really inspired by. And this will change and evolve over time, of course. 6 months ago, I discovered tonalism, and it's like completely changed the direction that I want to take my art in. That kind of stuff will happen to you. But I think it's really important to identify that direction, that ideal. Knowing where you want to go is the first step to actually getting there. You have to identify the goal in order to make a plan. And that brings us to the second step of finding your art style, or the direction that you want to take your art in, which is to figure out the common ground. So now that you've identified all of these just amazing artists, all of these paintings, drawings, sculptures, whatever, that you're really passionate about, you have to figure out how they all fit together. You have to figure out, one, like, why are you interested in them? What about all of these disparate parts, individual pieces, etc. really appeal to you? And 2, what do they all have in common aside from your mutual interests? So, for example, you might find that you're particularly compelled by art that tells a story, that has a narrative, right? Like really, really interesting narrative pieces that communicate emotional, political, or sociological themes, stuff that feels like a still from an animated film, right? Stuff that really just communicates something. You might find yourself really interested in political art that tells like a social commentary or has a political message. Or you might simply really be interested in stuff that is focused around portraits, around people. Human figures might be a thing that you're really interested in, or you might be really interested in loose brushwork. And what's important is that you look at them with a very analytical eye and try and figure out what they have in common. Imagine that you are a gallery owner, or you're responsible for putting together some exhibition for a gallery, and you know all of the artwork that you want to have in this exhibit. You have all of these pieces that you picked out earlier that you're really passionate about fitting together in this exhibit. Your boss is like, these pieces look great, but how do they all fit together? What are we gonna write as the description for this exhibit? It can be like as weird, like art bullshit words as you want it to be. I'm often very frustrated by how art critics describe paintings, because I'm like, you're just making stuff up, but like, make stuff up. You might find a nugget of wisdom here or there while you just like pull stuff right out of your ass as you're describing this exhibit. But I've often found that it ends up being a very useful exercise in figuring out how all of these very disparate pieces might come together. As far as my inspiration goes, I've found that there are kind of distinct groups to the pieces that I've collected over the years, right? We have like all of the European and American Impressionists. They focus a lot on the interplay of color and light, kind of looser forms, still articulated but not rendered. And then you have like all of this very loose brushwork, right? Brushwork is really like kind of the focus of the painting almost. The subject is interesting, but it's really the brushwork that's like kind of the fascinating part. And that also ties with the more modern side of things. So a lot of the modern art that I like is very like similarly impressionistic to the European and American Impressionists I'm passionate about, but it's even looser. So take like all of the loose brushwork and interesting colors and all of that, and then just like times it by 10, like crank that up to the extreme. And that is the more modern side of things. And so we see like this really clear advancement in these cool ideas as time goes on. And that's fascinating. And then kind of in the middle, in a more like kind of like tangential path between these two things is tonalism. I've been really fascinated by tonalism over the past couple of months because it really has like a lot of interesting bits of impressionism and more modern stuff. It's just like really interesting. A lot of tonalist artwork is very atmospheric. It's very dreamy. It's not as loose as impressionist stuff or the modern stuff that I like, but it's not super rendered either. It's just incredibly dreamlike and atmospheric. There's a lot of focus on the times of day in these paintings. They really want to evoke this like romantic sense of like, you are part of something bigger than yourself. Look at how beautiful the world is around you. And like kind of human settlement is seldom featured in these paintings. And I think that's just like really interesting. And I love the artwork, and exploring that muted color palette, kind of more atmospheric vibe of these tonalist paintings has really helped me advance my art skills. And that is where the next part of this exercise comes in. But before we talk about that, we do have to talk about the sponsor of this week's video, Factor. Factor is widely considered to be the #1 ready-to-eat meal kit. They deliver nutritious, chef-prepared meals right to your door. I've been using Factor myself off and on for months, for times when I get really busy or just don't have the energy to cook. I love cooking and baking, but there are just some weeks where I'm too sick or too busy with work, and Factor makes it easier for me to take care of myself and still eat nutritious meals. You can skip weeks whenever you want to, so it's extremely flexible. Factor is cheaper, healthier, faster, and tastier than getting most takeout on those days where you really just can't be bothered to make something for yourself. They have tons of options, 34 meals every single week that rotate out. There's new stuff all the time, and have plenty of vegan and vegetarian meals to choose from if you don't want to eat meat. They're really tasty. Like, I have consistently enjoyed the stuff that I've had from Factor. If you want to give it a try for yourself, head to factor75.com and use code KelseyR50 for a whopping 50% off your first box. That is an insane discount. Thank you so much to Factor for sponsoring the channel, and let's get back to the video. And the third step to finding the direction that you want to take your art in, now that you have the things that you really like, you've identified why you like them, how they all fit together, now you have to actually make a plan. You have to figure out, okay, I know where I am, I know where I want to be, how do I get there? What is separating me from my desired end state, my desired goal. And this is where you have to take a look at your art and be kind of critical about it, not in a demeaning way, okay, in a constructive way. You don't want to tear yourself down. You just want to figure out where you're at so you can improve and like get to where you want to go, okay? Don't do yourself the disservice of being like, I need to improve or I need to get better. No. Get specific, okay? Be as granular as you possibly can afford to be. Talk about how you need to improve your rendering, your drawing accuracy. Talk about how you need to work on your color mixing or your composition, or how the paintings that you really like have this strong graphic design element, these like really interesting carved shapes, and you're not good at that, you need to improve. That's what's separating you from your end goal. Not like, I need my art to be better. Okay, like tell me how your art needs to get better. Tell me specifically what separates you from the kinds of art that you want to make. Once you've identified all the areas you have to improve, that's your syllabus, like right there. Like that's your curriculum, that's your plan. That is the path to you where you want to go. Like all of those things that you just listed out, great. Google that, bestie. Like buy some art books on those topics, take some online courses, do literally whatever you can to get closer to that goal, work on all of those skills. Now you have a great path forward. As far as this relates to my own work, I think personally my tendency to overwork and go very detailed is actively holding my work back from where I want it to go. I'm oftentimes like falling into this trap of, I don't know how this rock is shaped. I don't know the geometry of it. I don't know how it's structured. So I'm going to invent detail with the hopes that it feels like to the viewer, I do know what I'm doing. When in reality, like I'm going in blind. I'm like approaching this painting with like a Jesus take the wheel approach, and that is super flawed. And my paintings end up looking super detailed, but also like not clear in a structural sense. And that's really holding my work back. I need to work on that. That's like a really big, fundamental, important skill that's holding me back from where I want to go. But one thing that like identifying the direction that I want to go has really helped my art is when it comes to color mixing and color harmonies. Being really interested and fascinated by the American tonalist movement in painting, which I know sounds extremely boring, and I'm already probably putting you to sleep when it comes to me talking about art history, but those muted color palettes, trying to emulate that kind of style has really deepened my understanding of color mixing. I am far more accurate now than I used to be, and my paintings, even when I don't work in a more toneless style, feels much more cohesive color-wise. My paintings feel more grounded and more realistic, and that is provided just like this immense benefit to my art and my creative practice. And speaking of practice, that is where step 4 comes in. Step 4 is practice. Taking all of this stuff that you're interested in, taking all of these goals that you have, and just filtering that through your brain. Putting pencil to paper, putting brush on canvas, like giving it a go. Not doing this mindlessly, mind you, but I'm talking about very deliberate practice. And I found the best way to push my art in a new direction is an exercise called master studies or master copies. This is where you take an existing painting by a very famous, dead probably, artist. If they're alive, that's fine. Just don't post it on social media, don't sell prints of it, etc., etc. You know the drill. It's not plagiarism, it's education, okay? You are going into this experience wanting to learn. The benefit of copying an existing painting rather than a reference is that you have an opportunity to really dive deeper into the particulars of this style, like what it is like to actually work this way. The purpose of a master copy or a master study at the end of the day is to help train you in brushwork and color mixing and composition and drawing and painting accuracy. All of those really important skills to develop that will surely benefit your art regardless of style, but also to help you figure out whether or not the kind of style that you like is actually feasible for you to work in, because sometimes you might find that working in particular techniques or particular methods just is not well suited for the way that your brain works. I just could not paint like Caravaggio. I have no interest in painting like Caravaggio. Would I love to be as talented as a draftsman as he was, as talented in composition and color theory and anatomy, sure, I would love that. But the size and scope of his paintings, the narrative elements, the human figures, like just the sheer scale, that's not for me. I don't want to spend months and years on a painting. I just have no interest in that. And if I were to do a master study of a Caravaggio painting, I would discover very early on that I am not interested in painting like that. I've been a fan of Van Gogh's artwork for as long as I can remember, but I recently tried to do a master study of one of his still lifes, a still life of a bunch of pears on like a nice like blue dark background. And while I love that painting, while I would like my art to look like that, sort of, or I thought that I did, while I was trying out that master study, while I was giving this exercise a go, I discovered about myself that I am simply not well suited to the very loose, stubby brushwork that Van Gogh is, that I personally prefer the more muted, blended out, dreamy, atmospheric elements that tonalist paintings have. And that Van Gogh's work, while gorgeous, while I love it, while I would hang it in my house in a heartbeat, of course, is just not something that I want to make myself. And that is a very important distinction that you have to learn in order to just cut out so much wasted time in this artistic journey. And once you've done a couple of master studies, what I would really recommend next is to take a painting that you love from one of those artists, to take a slightly similar reference. So if it's a portrait, find another portrait reference, and then take that painting and that reference, that photo reference, and like mash the two together. Try to paint this reference in this style and see what happens. This exercise is deceptively simple, but actually much more complex than a master study because it really requires you to not just copy a painting, but to take the lessons that you learn from copying the similar style and to now apply that stylistic vocabulary, those elements, like that technique, in this very new context. You will not understand or have an example necessarily for how artists in this style solve the problems this specific reference photo poses, but you now have to figure out how to solve those problems for yourself. And that will be an insanely educational experience. Every time I have done these two exercises, I have learned so much. And overall, I think it's really important to remember that your art style is a very fluid thing. You can have multiple of them, it will change over time, and your tastes will change too. My interests as an artist have evolved dramatically over even the past 6 months, and I'm just really excited to see where it takes me still and how my tastes continue to evolve. And again, investing in yourself and this journey, being deliberate about where you want to take your art and focusing on that skill development will do you just so much good. But last thing to note, this is also not a magic trick to making perfect art all of the time. You will still make art that you despise. Some of your exercises, some of your paintings will be terrible. That's fine. That's a part of the learning process. Your art will continue to evolve, and you're going to continue to have paintings that you really don't like, that you absolutely hate, that you want to set on fire, and that's just a part of the process. But if you want to learn more about the lessons that I have learned on this journey, you can watch any of the things that I have on the screen right now, and I hope to see you there. Thank you so much again to Factor for sponsoring this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.